Hello, great to see you, Annabelle. Just delighted that you've made this space to have a conversation with me. Annabelle's been doing some work with us for the past couple of months and is a diversity, inclusion, anti-racism educator, an activist. And honestly, Annabelle, I've learned so much from you in the few encounters, conversations we've had. And this recording comes from me having conversation that makes me think, I want other people to hear this. And I think it's useful. I think probably some people feel like I feel about a number of things. So I come into this conversation. I've been thinking a lot recently, quite a lot around diversity of thought, diversity and inclusion more generally. And I suppose on a very personal level, become quite frustrated at myself. I recognize that my social circles, the way that I work, the people I interact with are generally like me in some ways. They think like me. I realize that I'm pretty blind actually to a lot of other perspectives. I know, this is just quite natural. We gravitate towards people who are like us. But I recognize our world is now so complex. There's so much interconnectedness. It's so volatile, it's so uncertain. And that for myself and for businesses that I'm working with and working in, I want us to make better decisions. I want us to make decisions that are more inclusive and that value diversity. We all talk about diversity so much. So I'm coming into this conversation really just wanting to hear some of your perspective and some of your thinking and challenging some of the things that perhaps we all fall into the trap of and how we can do it better in our organisation. Thank you. Sorry, that was a bit of a rambling introduction. But Annabelle, can you just tell me a little bit, or tell anyone who might listen to this video a little bit about yourself and how you've ended up doing some of the activities that you've been doing over the past few years?
Yeah, so I started wanting to educate people on my experience and sort of create a place where diversity can thrive as a response and a healing process after the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that really brought issues that I was really passionate about into the forefront. And I realized it was more than just police brutality, but it was also about the things that I had experienced and the nuances and my lived experience, which tends to be swept under the rug or tends to be invalidated quite often. So I started educating on TikTok, and I used that as a way to sort of formulate everyday tips and everyday understanding for people who may have different experience than I have, but for people to prevent othering and to prevent casualized and casual racism in just every sort of compartment within society. I hold the viewpoint that we are changing and we are evolving as a society, and so do our problems evolve. And most of the times when we talk about big, systemic issues, we're talking about, police brutality, or we're talking about things which create very racial stratification and disproportions between different communities. But I also think it's more than that. I think it's people not really understanding how lived experience and culture and cultural difference create different experiences for people. Things like microaggressions, things like unconscious and conscious bias, things like invert and indirect discrimination. I think that all of these things affect people in different ways. And the more we can cultivate understanding around this, the more we are able to sort of build diversity which is authentic. So that's sort of how I got into educating. And then I realized that in the workplace, we spend so much of our time sort of assimilating and trying to fit a sort of one size fits all approach to workplace and workplace culture. And because everybody is working and everybody is trying to bring themselves into the workplace, but historically it has not been accepted. And not even just the workplace, but any institution and community that we're a part of. I mean, as a student, I instinctively go to sort of assimilate and I go to fit in rather than to excel and be my own person. And I recognize that every person with lived experience has that same commonality in terms of they have to sacrifice bits of themselves to fit in and to progress and to be considered as normal and acceptable. And I thought that, you know, businesses, corporations, organizations have so much to learn from this. And within the EDI space, there is an audience who are willing to listen and who are willing to learn. And I think that that was so important. And as soon as I had that platform on TikTok where I was educating the future change makers, I was also able to use, you know, EDI consulting and advising and my activism space to educate change makers right now.
Yeah, amazing. Annabelle, and how old are you? Don't mind me asking you. Say that again, sorry.
20.
20, amazing. Like what you've already achieved, and yeah, it really inspiring and really challenging. And some of the things that you're saying there already directly challenge me, and so I've been a people leader in businesses as either previously as CEO or as a director of, or head of people. And you know, we as organisations have this desire in recruitment, etc., to find people who are going to be a good fit for our business. In the past, the term culture fit's been used quite a lot, and we want people who are going to come and you know, yeah, I say be a good fit. What you directly are challenging us on there is one, that whole concept, and actually do we need real difference and diversity in our businesses, and perhaps we're scared of doing that. And secondly is about people therefore allowed to be authentic and bring their authentic self to the workplace. Tell me a little bit, maybe on that bit around authenticity. Mm-hmm. Something you raised with me the other day was you know, it really challenged me. So I don't know if you can share some of your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think one thing about difference is that people are often scared of difference, and they are often scared of the unknown or something which is like new to them. And what we tend to do, especially around like EDI conversations or just conversations in terms of culture change and structural change, is we focus on the people who are scared of the difference. We don't focus on the people who are different. And I think that when we are talking about the people who are different, we realize that this fear of difference and this sort of adverse reaction to difference and difference being welcomed into an organization, it creates a sort of insecurity for people, and it creates a generational insecurity which is passed down. I speak from my experience when, as a Black woman, I am taught to sort of not take up space. I'm taught to conceal in the background and to get in the room, but to not make any noise. You know, when people are asked to speak up and speak out and, you know, make a lot of change in something and make sure that, you know, they are known and their impact is known. When I grew up and as I'm entering the professional world, from my family and from my culture, I've been taught to do the opposite, because to be in the room is just considered a blessing in itself, and it's considered a glass ceiling, that this is something that this is the top of the top and there's not any more that we can do. So that's a way in which difference and culture difference affects the people who are different and the people with lived experience, because it affects the way in which we enter situations. It affects how we view ourselves in relation to other people. We tend to put ourselves below other people. We tend to want to fit in with them and get rid of things that, you know, things that form our own identity, just in order to get in the same rooms as them. And it also affects our like ambitions. When people are out here like aiming to be CEOs or aiming to be, you know, something really big, we are taught, you know, just to be in the room is good. Just get in that room and that's it. That's all you can really do. And, you know, even though we can question, you know, is this tokenistic? Are they just putting me in here because I'm good at concealing myself and I'm good at assimilating? That's something that we are taught to ignore. And we are taught to just be there and be grateful that we are there, because it puts food on the table.
Yeah, so okay, so in some of the organisations I've worked at and still work with, you know, we're so keen to create environments where people feel safe to talk, to share their opinion, to give surveys, etc. And if I'm honest, we can become quite frustrated at times that team members won't speak up or won't say what they really think. But actually, you're saying to us that actually for some, depending on the lived experience, and that could be, you know, from any background, etc., because of that lived experience, you know, you're not just up against you're up against everything that they've been communicated to, their conditioning from childhood, to whether they're going to be able to be really authentic with you in that setting.
Definitely. It's honestly, I think when we view things in isolation, it blocks us from seeing the way that culture, history, and a lot of other sociological backgrounds really influence what we've been taught. And some people with like similar backgrounds to me, if people ask them a question in regard to work or in regard to surveys and stuff like that, never ever have I personally been taught to sort of tell the truth. I've been taught to say what is acceptable, or to say what will keep me safe, or to say what will keep me in a job. That sort of passed down generational job, sort of like instability and insecurity, it sort of conceals you from being able to speak and being able to talk about your own identity, your own experience, because you're more, when you're in the workplace, you'd like to fit in with the workplace. So you'd say whatever, you know, your boss wants you to say, or you'd say what the majority opinion is, just for your own safety and just for your own well-being.
Okay, I want to come back to some of that shortly, because what we talk, because I think again, if I was listening to this, I'd be thinking, okay, but what do we do? Like, what can we do? How do we approach this? But I just want to come back to that term, culture fit, and fitting in with organizational cultures. How does that term sit with you?
I think I personally don't really like the term culture fit. I mean, I'm not saying the term in itself is sort of awful, but I'm saying the way that it has been used historically has not been in a great way, because it's been used to justify the like exclusion of difference, and how some people won't be a culture fit because of their background or because of where they are from. So this is something which is really complicated, because obviously you'd want a business where everybody is getting along and everybody sort of like knows each other and like resonates with each other in a way. But even that in itself, that is a form of bias. That's a form of bias where, you know, you are only taking a liking to people who display similar characteristics as you. So, you know, if I don't display that characteristic, I'm seen in a bad way, and I'm seen not to be part of the culture, even though difference is integral to our culture. We live in a multi-ethnic society. You know, difference is part of what defines us and defines the UK in itself. But the exclusion of difference is used in replacement to sort of culture fit, which is created through the people who are in power, and the people who were in power and who were making the decisions wanting to make those decisions for people and with people who look like them and who are like them.
Okay. Yes, it's almost that challenge that we, as business organizations, we absolutely, I don't think any organization, they don't value diversity. You know, that's something that organizations are very aware of what they're seeking for, but it's coming with a load of conditions that we only want diversity that actually fits with us and the way that we do things. And that's a huge challenge for organizations, isn't it? Because again, just on the flip of that, one of the challenges is that I see within that is that if we have teams that everyone thinks very differently, that there is a certain complexity to get people to work together well. Decisions can take longer. You know, as you say, it could be more difficult and challenging at times to do that. So how do we try and balance that in our organizations?
I think that's a really, really good question. I think in response to sort of, you know, if we have really different and diverse teams, you know, we worry about the progress and how slow the progress can be. I would say in rebuttal to that, if we don't have diversity, what are the consequences of decisions that are made which could really impact different communities, because you didn't have those people in the room helping and contributing to make those decisions? I mean, lack of diversity and, you know, exclusion has really, really dire consequences. And due to lack of diversity years ago, I am being taught things which my mother or my grandmother had like experienced, all due to lack of diversity in their workplaces for so long. But this is something that has passed down to me and something that has been passed down within my community. to sort of, you know, that when you enter the workplace is not for you. You have to fit into the workplace. And this is something that we are actively trying to unlearn and relearn, that we are meant to take space and we are meant to be here and be our authentic selves. But that is an active learning. So I would weigh out the sort of consequences versus the benefits of not having diversity, because I think the consequences outweigh the benefits a large amount. Because, you know, say you have an advertising campaign and it's targeted for a specific community. If you don't have anyone who is linked to that community or understands that community, or cross-cultural awareness between all of the different communities, you could really go out and do some harmful damage to all of the impressionable minds that may be watching the advert. It's things like this that you want to avoid, not just for business innovation, but business longevity. These things come in hand with diversity and who you are appealing to.
Yeah, really interesting and challenging, and certainly, like I said at the beginning, really, we know that where there's complexity in our decision making, or where the reach is wide, and a lot of us are working in very global businesses now, there's a lot to consider, and there's absolutely a danger if we haven't got that diversity of thought. Okay. So just one thing it's come up recently in a few grad schemes that we've been running and developing, and that really is around right and wrong in one sense. And this is maybe a really challenging idea for us, particularly for us in the West. But there's certainly been some very strong progressive agendas within companies and in policies, particularly in response to the LGBTQ plus movement and things like that. And absolutely, like, you know, personally fully subscribe to that. You know, fantastic. That's where organisations are at. However, what we perhaps, the challenge, particularly working in a global context, is the consideration of how that is very difficult, perhaps, with people who come from strong religious faith backgrounds, who have been conditioned to not think like that. How do we begin to manage that?
I think managing it requires a lot of cross-cultural understanding, and it requires a removal from the right and wrong agenda that we really have installed within our workplaces. Because if we take the example of people with lived experience, when they enter a workplace, they are trying to assimilate and they are trying to get on and fit in with that workplace culture, which is a very one size fits all type approach. So if we have conversations where they have been conditioned to close their eyes to these conversations, or to not participate or take, you know, it's just something which is considered a taboo within their community. And in the workplace, they are all saying, okay, well, this is what we have to do, and this is how we have to open our eyes and open conversation. It puts them in a really difficult situation, because if they have parents where their parents have taught them, don't talk about this, or they have a community where they shouldn't talk about this, and then they have a workplace which is saying, if you don't talk about this, you're wrong, and you know, you're behind the agenda and you shouldn't be within the workplace because you're not culture fit, because you're not progressive, and you're not doing all of this kind of stuff. You put them in a really difficult situation, because they've already had to sort of sacrifice a lot of themselves just to be able to be in the same rooms with these people, but they're also having to sacrifice their culture and sacrifice how they are seeing things just to be able to be labeled as right and be able to be the culture fit and be a fit within their community. So I think understanding that not everybody can come to the conversation from the same place. People have different perspectives, they have different conditionings, they come, like, understanding perspective within a conversation and how people come from different standpoints, and that influences their viewpoints. We're not saying that, you know, it is fine for them to not be progressive or not be down with the sort of inclusive and equality genders and stuff like that. But we're just saying that understanding how different people come from different backgrounds and their lived experience means that these are the values that have been installed in them, and finding a safe space and a way for them to really unpack this and talk about, how can I progress being the person that I am with my background? That's something that is genuinely missed. And a lot of the time people sort of have negative connotations towards them if they aren't willing to have a conversation about, I don't know, like an LGBTQ plus agenda. We're not saying that, you know, they are against LGBTQ plus, but we're saying that they need a different space, or they need a different perspective, which will allow them to facilitate cross-cultural understanding.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Really, really interesting. And my follow-on question regarding, I suppose, to that in some extent, but moving on a little bit again, it's around how we make decisions based on the majority and discount the minority often. And I suppose in some respects, what I hear Annabelle's talking about is how do we use that minority viewpoint a lot of the time, or those lived experiences, how do we use them to enrich our businesses and our decision making?
100%. I think sometimes when we're talking about approach, it's very much a, you know, either this approach or no approach. And if you are sort of not, if you are not 100% in tune with one approach, you are considered to be you believe the opposite, which is not the truth. Like, a lot of people fall within the middle ground. They fall in that gray area. And when you're making business decisions, taking a sort of linear approach where it's like either we go through the way that we have decided, we go through the way that we in the West, that's what we want to do. And they apply it to sort of all different countries. But different countries require different approaches. Different communities require different approaches. It's about having a versatile range of different approaches with understanding and collaboration from those people who the approach will affect or the approach has affected. It's very much, you know, it is not black and white, and it's not one approach or no approach. It's about changing the approach and creating the space where people can say, okay, well, when you're talking about this, we don't like this term being used, use this term instead. You can have these same conversations while finding a middle ground and sort of reconciling the differences between the approaches, rather than assuming that the only approach that we present is the right one. And if you don't agree with it, that you're wrong, or you're against, you're against equality and inclusivity. It just means that people are used to doing things a different way, and allowing them that sort of space to be able to say, okay, well, this is my experience and this is how I think you should do it. I think that's important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really interesting and full of challenge, isn't it? You know, that's, you know, we discussing this the other day and talking about what if what somebody's lived experience directly is in opposition to your personal values or your set of beliefs, or even what the organization's set of values and beliefs are, and actually by that being revealed, exposed, and brought into the fore, how that, you know, if not managed carefully, can actually be more damaging potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I think safety for people with lived experience is something that is crucial, and it's something that needs to be an integral part of all sort of anti-discrimination policies and all workplace environments. And as I was saying before, a focus on sort of values and a focus on a culture fit, not around who they are or what they look like, but a culture fit in terms of what values, how do you carry yourself, what do you believe is, you know, right and is the right thing to do. And having sort of that as your foundation of a workplace, of culture, you can allow people to express themselves while still understanding that, you know, integrity is important, authenticity is important, and, you know, empathy towards different people is important. Because when people enter the workplace, you want to be safe, you want to feel safe, and you want to feel like the people who are around you don't want you to be harmed or don't want you to be discriminated against. And I think that's something which is important, and it's not really talked about enough, because we're talking about incidents of workplace racism or incidents of racial disparities within a workplace, and people are just like, okay, you know, the system's really, really bad. But people aren't talking enough about who are you hiring, what values do they have, and how is that being translated into the decisions they make, into their behavior, into their etiquette. These things aren't really spoken about enough, and I think a real foundational value, and we should transform culture fit to be around these company values.
Yeah, fascinating. And it's really interesting. And just for context, you know, myself and Annabelle have been thinking a lot around methodology and ways of working to facilitate this within our organizations and supporting other organizations to do that, and particularly supporting leaders, because it does come down to a personal skill, doesn't it? An interpersonal skill in one sense, and thinking address this. So we've been talking quite a lot around creating spaces and facilitating space to really work through this, to develop that wider perspective and understanding, then can help inform approaches, etc. But without, the answers aren't always going to be easy, but that recognition that wider perspective is always going to be helpful. So what we've talked about there, begin to talk about there is some of this methodology, and we're talking about values there, Annabelle, and the part that they play. How can an organisation use values or rather than the company values? What values need to be at play for these kind of diverse conversations to take place?
I think definitely a value of empathy. I always say that starting the conversation on the prefix that I don't know everything and my way isn't the right way, it's just a way. Starting that on empathy between different cultures, empathy between different communities, between different types of people. I think starting that and understanding that I may not know everything, but I'm here to empathize with you because we are all in the same organization and we all contribute to the same organizations in different ways. So I think having a reciprocal empathy between the people partaking in these, cultures, partaking in these, in the thought club, I think that's important as well. I also think authenticity, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to strip away the sort of covert assimilation that people have been so normalized to. We're trying to take that away. I was speaking to my friend the other day and she was talking about how she feels as if she has to mask when she goes to the workplace. Her language is different, her accent is different, a lot of things are just different, and it takes so much away from her that when she goes to the office, she dreads it. It's about emphasis on authenticity in terms of come as you are, and come as you are, and use that to use it to use it to the benefit of diversity of thought, and use it to help other people in understanding how to interact with different people. I also think so empathy and authenticity and integrity. The stuff that you're saying, it should be the stuff that you're saying. Obviously, you're influenced by culture, by different things, but making sure that you're able to strip it down and attribute your whole range of experiences and how that has created you. Make sure that you come across in a way that is your way and nobody else's way as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important challenge, isn't it? So we can open up space, ask people to be authentic, but we also need to help them to recognize how they're communicating, what they're sharing is which is what you're saying, isn't it? So them coming and just saying what they really think in a way that actually is not considerate of the other people in the room is where this becomes the risk of conflict or real confrontation is at play. How do we manage that difference of perspective and where there is potential conflict? What's the environment that we need to create to do that?
I think an environment founded upon sort of understanding of nuance, because these things can exist at the same time. I think the issue with people being in sort of echo chambers and hearing, people just agreeing with them and not hearing a difference of opinion is that you seem to think that, or you're under the impression that there's only one opinion, there's only one way to it, there's only one approach, there's only one way forward. But I think understanding and facilitating that understanding of nuance and how you can believe this, but I can believe this, and I'm going to believe this because this is influenced by my culture, my history, my family, my traditions, and I'm going to believe this because of that as well. But it's not about, okay, well, I'm going to try and change your opinion, but it's about, okay, well, you believe this, I believe this. Now I understand why you believe this, and you understand why I believe that. So going forward, if I'm in a situation where there are people who believe different things than me, the emphasis won't be on me trying to debate with them or trying to change their opinion or trying to pursue my own opinion, but it's about trying to find a middle ground. And I think that's through understanding of nuance. Yeah,
no, I think that's really good. and really interesting. So I think one of the challenges, and I suppose where I started with my personal frustration is that I'm not actually moving in particularly diverse spaces. I perhaps am not having those conversations which are at odds with other people, because I've surrounded myself with people who are probably more like myself or my wavelength. And for a lot of organizations, particularly the smaller organizations, will be thinking, you know, we do lack diversity. How can we begin to think diversely and really try and create some of that cognitive diversity, without just going out and recruiting more diverse people? I know that's obviously part of it potentially, but what's some of the things, and we've been talking about a few things to try and do that, or try and help organizations who've just got a desire to think more diversely, to do that?
I think a really vital role of the Thought Club is bridging that gap between lack of diversity and diversity of thought. Because if there are no people in the room who bring perspectives from underrepresented communities, there will be no space for them, because you can't accommodate for something that you don't know is there. So I think inputting those diverse perspectives, teaching people to question their beliefs or question their decision making, if they believe this is the best decision, facilitating an environment where people are saying, is that the best decision? What about from this perspective? What do you think will change then? What if this person was watching it? What do you think will change then? And if we can't do it in a sort of natural way by just getting more diverse professionals, we will insert it in an active way. And I think that brings so much more to, you know, diverse thinking and to diversity of thought, because it's an active thing. It's something that is conscious, and it's something that you are taking steps to further your business. It's a very, you know, proactive thing, which you're saying, okay, let's not even wait for problems. Before problems present themselves, what can we do to prevent problems? And we prevent problems by active, you know, action towards inputting of people of like diverse thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Annabelle. So Annabelle's just referred there to Thought Club. I've not mentioned it yet, but this is the concept that we have been discussing and developing, and really about bringing opportunities to different businesses, to different settings, for maybe people from different businesses to come together to do exactly what we've been talking about there, Annabelle, which is really to challenge our diversity of thought, to bring in a variety of perspectives, to really be able to consider what that means for our businesses, how that could inform the way we do things going forward. And just again, the challenge with this is it's not about answers, is it? In one sense, it's not about there's a right way to do this. That's the nuance. That's the challenge. Yeah, I suppose the question is within this is dialogue, is understanding and perspective impactful enough? And I think it is, and I just didn't know what your perspective on that was, Annabelle.
I think it really is. There's a reason that, you know, I call myself an educator, because I think dialogue and talking and conversation, learning orally, I think that is an amazing way to create impact, because people learn, and people learn the phrases that you're using. They learn the terminology, they learn how to do things. And even if they don't understand a specific word, or they don't understand how the perspective makes a decision different, it prompts them to understand how. It prompts them to go and do their further research. It prompts them to sort of learn more. So if they are in a situation similar to that in the future, alarm bells will be ringing, and they'll be able to sort of take this dialogue and move it forward and increase its longevity.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to say again, I've been so enriched, and my perspective's been expanded hugely just through our conversations, Annabelle. And I suppose we've been trying to, by just these kind of conversations, model what we think Thought Club could be, and what that is, and also just ways of beginning to think differently. And I suppose just for those people who are listening, just if this is you, if this is you're thinking, yeah, do you know what, I'd love to experience or be educated or work through a process of really trying to diversify your thought, diversify your perspective, then please get in touch, because we're planning a number of activities, and we haven't got all the answers. You know, that's not what's going on here. We are just a group of people who are keen to expand our thinking and our diversity of thought going forward. Annabelle, is there any last few remarks or anything you think we've missed that would be just worth mentioning?
No, nothing jumps to mind.
Amazing, thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was yeah, I really enjoyed that. So
Thank
very
you.
much appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.